The email arrived at 4:17 p.m. on a Friday. Friday afternoon is the preferred time for corporate cowards because it gives them a head start to run to their cars and escape onto the highway before you can even process your anger. The subject line was brief: compensation review and Q3 adjustment. I did not open it right away. I let it sit there on my secondary monitor, its bold text pulsing like a headache. I took a slow sip of my tea. Looking around the open plan office of Apex Logics, a tech firm in Silicon Valley, all I saw was a room full of noise. To my left, a couple of sales guys were playing ping pong, celebrating a contract that I knew they had structured incorrectly. To my right, two marketing interns were recording a video about office hustle culture. My name is Arthur Vance. I am 55 years old, and I am the senior contract specialist here. In plain terms, that means I am the person who actually reads the 400-page documents that the sales team signs without looking. I am the one who keeps the company from accidentally giving away its source code to shell companies in overseas tax havens. I am the guardrail on a highway where everyone else is driving drunk. I finally clicked the email. Hi Arthur, thank you for your patience regarding your salary adjustment request. We have reviewed your metrics, which are excellent. However, due to the reallocation of Q3 funds into strategic acquisitions, your raise got lost in legal. We do not have the budget approval code to process it this cycle. Let us review this again next quarter. Best, Justin Finch, HR business partner. Lost in legal. I stared at those words. It was a lazy lie, almost insulting. I am legal. The general counsel, Harvey Miller, spends 80% of his week playing golf and the other 20% asking me how to merge PDF files. He would not know what a budget approval code looked like if it was taped to his driver. This was the third year in a row they did this. 3 years ago, it was market uncertainty. 2 years ago, it was structural reorganization. Now, my raise was lost in legal. Meanwhile, I knew for a fact that Justin Finch had just approved a $15,000 retention bonus for a junior software engineer who had crashed our database twice last month. I knew it because I had to process the paperwork for it. I did not scream. I did not type a furious reply. I simply took off my reading glasses, cleaned them with a cloth, and felt a cold switch flip in my mind. It was not anger. It was total clarity. They treated me like a piece of office furniture, a reliable chair that you sit on and ignore. They assumed that because I was quiet, because I did not play ping pong or wear branded vests, I had no leverage. They were wrong. I looked back at the sales team. They were celebrating the Vanguard Logistics account. It was the crown jewel of Apex Logics, an $80 million contract with a massive shipping firm. It was the deal that paid for the CEO's new glass office and the fancy espresso machine. It was also a deal that I had written. Not the marketing slides, but the actual contract. The master service agreement, the indemnity schedules, and the 60-page addendum on royalty structures. I remembered that addendum clearly. I wrote it 3 years ago when Apex Logics was small, broke, and desperate. We needed Vanguard to sign, but we could not offer them the upfront equity they wanted. So, I created a performance-based royalty trigger. It was complex, buried in dense paragraphs of dry text. I stood up, my knees popping, and walked to the secure file room. Most of our files are digital now, but the original Vanguard contract with the physical signatures was kept in a fireproof safe. I had the code. I was the only person who ever opened it. The file room smelled of old paper and dust. I spun the dial on the safe. Click, clack. I pulled out the thick blue binder labeled Vanguard Logistics Executed Copy. I flipped to page 42, clause 17. I ran my finger over the small size 10 font in the event that the service provider achieves 3 consecutive quarters of 99. 99% system uptime while processing in excess of 5 terabytes of client data. The milestones provider acknowledges that intellectual property rights for the core routing algorithm shall shift to a shared royalty model, entitling the original IP architect to a retroactive commission of 0.5% of gross contract value unless a waiver is signed by said architect. I turned to the signature page, signed by the CEO of Vanguard, signed by our CEO, Garrison Brooks, and on the bottom line next to IP architect, signed, Arthur Vance. I closed the binder. The room was quiet, but I could feel the energy building. My raise was not lost. It was right here, hiding in plain sight, waiting for 3 years. I was not going to argue with Justin. I was going to teach the executives a lesson about reading the fine print. I put the binder in my bag. Taking original contracts out of the building violates policy, but so does wage theft. And I knew that by Monday morning, company policy would be the least of their worries. Over the weekend, I worked in my study at home. No ping pong, no shouting sales teams, just my espresso machine and my cat, who watched me from the desk. I had the contract. Now I needed the data. Clause 17 was a sleeping giant. It only mattered if our systems performed exceptionally well. I logged into the database. I have administrator access. The CTO had given me root access 5 years ago because he was tired of approving my audit requests, and he had simply forgotten to revoke it. I pulled the performance reports for the last 24 months, Q1 2023, 99.992% uptime, Q2 2023, 995% uptime, Q3 2023, 99.998% uptime. There was the milestone. 3 consecutive quarters of near perfection. I remembered those months. The engineering team slept under their desks. I ordered 70 pizzas for them. The CEO bought a new sports car to celebrate. I received a $50 coffee gift card. Next, I checked the data volume. Client data processed, 12 terabytes, 15 terabytes, 22 terabytes. All of them were way over the 5 terabyte limit. I sat back, the light of my monitor reflecting on my glasses. The math was simple. 0.5% of the $80 million contract was $400,000. Add the retroactive penalties for lack of notification and interest, and Apex Logics owed me nearly $500,000. But it was more than just the money. I had written that clause as a safeguard back when we feared a hostile takeover. The new executives, hired long after the contract was signed, had never bothered to read it. They treated the Vanguard deal like a cash cow, unaware that the fence around the field was electrified. I printed the reports. I printed the emails where the CEO bragged to the board about these exact numbers. I was building a solid case. On Sunday evening, I sat on my deck with a glass of wine. I did not call a lawyer yet. Instead, I called the opposing counsel, Richard Thornton, the general counsel for Vanguard. We had negotiated against each other for years. We were sparring partners who respected each other. He answered on the second ring. Arthur, his voice was deep and calm. Sunday evening. Either your systems are down or you are resigning. Neither, Richard, I said. I am doing some audit work. I was reviewing the agreement we signed 3 years ago. Specifically, the royalty addendum. There was a long silence on the line. I heard him shift in his chair. Clause 17. He asked. He knew. He was an excellent lawyer, and he had likely flagged it years ago, knowing it was a massive liability for us, but a safe bet for Vanguard. Clause 17, I confirmed. The company has missed the notification and payment requirements. The milestones were met 18 months ago, and I have not received a cent. In fact, they just denied my cost of living increase. Richard let out a dry laugh. That is incredibly negligent of them. If they are in breach of payments to the IP creator, it compromises the licensing shield for the entire platform. Technically, Apex Logics is running our systems without a valid license right now. Technically, yes, I said. I wanted to let you know before I file a formal claim. I appreciate the warning, Richard said. Let us have lunch tomorrow. The steakhouse on 3rd, noon. I hung up. My hands were steady. I felt a deep sense of calm. I was no longer just an employee. I was a massive liability. And come Monday morning, I was going to be the most expensive problem they had ever ignored. The restaurant was dark, expensive, and smelled of wood smoke. It was the kind of place where deals were made in low voices, and the waiters knew not to interrupt. Richard Thornton was already sitting at a corner table, a glass of water in front of him. He looked like a silver-haired wolf in a charcoal gray suit. He did not stand up when I arrived. He simply nodded toward the empty chair. Arthur, you look like a man who knows where the bodies are buried, he said. I sat down and unfolded my napkin. I dug the graves, Richard. Of course I know where they are. Richard did not waste time. My team reviewed the agreement this morning. You are entirely correct. Clause 17 is ironclad. It is actually a brilliant piece of drafting. Who let you put that in? The former CEO, I said. He was desperate to close the deal. He told me to add whatever protections were necessary to secure the intellectual property. He thought it protected the company from competitors. He did not realize it protected the creator from the company. Richard smirked. And the current general counsel, Harvey Miller. Harvey thinks force majeure is a brand of French cognac, I said. Richard laughed, a short, sharp sound. He tapped a finger on the table. Here is the situation from Vanguard's side. We pay Apex Logix $20 million a year. We rely on your logistics routing software. If Apex Logix is in breach of its own internal IP licensing terms, it creates a massive compliance risk for us. If you file for an injunction under federal copyright law, you could theoretically freeze the code. I agreed. But I do not want to destroy the product. I built the architecture. I just want the royalties that the contract guarantees. And you want them to sweat, Richard added. I took a sip of water. I want them to learn that lost in legal is not a valid business strategy. Richard opened his briefcase, pulled out a document, and slid it across the table. This is a draft. Vanguard takes vendor compliance very seriously. If we discover a vendor is failing to pay its primary IP architect, we are obligated to issue a formal notice of inquiry. We will demand a full audit of all IP agreements to ensure the software we license is unencumbered. I read the draft letter. It was addressed to our CEO Garrison Brooks. Urgent audit of intellectual property compliance and royalties. It demanded proof of compliance with Clause 17, listed the exact milestones, and requested a response within 48 hours. If you send this, I said. Looking up, Harvey will panic. The CEO will scream. Good, Richard said. They have been overcharging us for custom support hours for 6 months. I have been looking for a leverage point. You just handed me one. But you realize, Arthur, once I send this, there is no going back. They will search for the leak. They will suspect you. They can suspect all they want, I replied. They cannot prove I spoke to you, and even if they try to retaliate, California Labor Code, Section 1102.5 protects whistleblowers. Retaliating against an employee for asserting contractual wage rights carries treble damages, Richard murmured, smiling. A beautiful term. I will have this sent tomorrow morning at 9:02 a.m. I suggest you be at your desk. The show should be highly educational. I went back to the office for the afternoon. I sat at my desk, cleared support tickets, and helped a junior developer debug a data pipeline. I was cooperative. I was visible. At 4 p.m., Harvey Miller walked past my desk. He was carrying his golf bag, heading out early for a charity tournament. See you Tuesday, Arthur, he called out. Don't work too hard. Have a good game, Harvey, I said. Tuesday morning arrived. At 9:02 a.m., the email from Vanguard entered our servers. It went directly to the CEO, the CFO, and the GC. Since I monitored our internal compliance ticketing queues, I watched the digital paper trail in real time. At 9:15 a.m., the CEO, Garrison Brooks, forwarded it to Harvey. Subject, FUD. Urgent audit. Harvey, look at this. Probably just standard corporate compliance spam. Do not let it slow down the merger talks. At 9:30 a.m., Harvey forwarded it to the CFO, Preston Cole. Subject, urgent audit. Preston, they are asking about royalty structures. Do we have any of those active? Just send them some basic financial files. At 9:45 a.m., the email finally dropped into my inbox. It came from Harvey Miller. Subject, Vanguard inquiry. Arthur, Vanguard sent some formal email about an IP audit and Clause 17. Sounds like legacy contract noise. Can you draft a standard response confirming we are in compliance? Do not spend too much time on it. I need you to focus on the merger due diligence files. Thanks, Harvey. I stared at the monitor, holding back a laugh. They did not even open the attachment. They saw a clause they did not recognize, assumed it was meaningless, and forwarded it to the one person in the building who knew exactly what it meant. They had just asked the architect of the trap to disable it. I clicked reply. Hi, Harvey. I will log this in the system. I need to pull the original archives to verify the specific requirements of Clause 17. It will take a couple of days to cross-reference the logs. I will keep you posted. Best, Arthur, sure thing. Take your time, Harvey replied immediately. Take my time. I had no intention of taking my time. I was going to let the clock run out. The Vanguard notice gave us 48 hours to respond. That meant Thursday at 9:02 a.m. If we missed the deadline, Vanguard reserved the right to suspend payments. I created a folder on my private encrypted drive named Contingency Escalation. I moved 3 items into it. First, the email from HR denying my raise. Second, the email from Harvey instructing me to respond to the audit regarding my own unpaid royalties. Third, a copy of the physical Vanguard contract. I sat back. Invisibility in a corporate office is usually a curse. But when you are planning a checkmate, being invisible is the ultimate advantage. I was a ghost in their system, and they were handing me the matches. Thursday came and went. The 48-hour deadline from Vanguard passed at 9:02 a.m. I did not send a response. I did not draft a compliance letter. Instead, I updated our internal ticketing system. Status, pending legal review, awaiting executive sign-off. I was simply waiting for them to do their jobs. They did not at 5:01 p.m. on Thursday. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard Thornton. Radio silence, it read. Old move, I typed back. They think it is spam. They delegated it to me. I am reviewing, Richard replied with a single emoji. Popcorn. Friday morning was the monthly audit committee meeting. We gathered in the Disrupt conference room, which had glass walls, uncomfortable chairs, and a $20,000 espresso machine humming in the corner. Preston Cole, the CFO, stood at the head of the table. He was 35, wore a vest that cost more than my car, and spoke with the absolute confidence of a man who had never faced a real consequence. "Okay, team," Preston said, clapping his hands. "Vanguard's monthly payment is looking strange. Accounts receivable says the wire is pending. Anyone know what is going on?" My heart beat a little faster. Vanguard had frozen the payment. Richard was moving quickly. "Probably just a bank holiday," Harvey Miller said, spinning a pen between his fingers. "I will ping their legal team later." "Do that," Preston said. "We need that cash flow cleared for the Q4 leadership retreat in Tahoe." Then a quiet voice spoke from the end of the table. It was Owen Pierce. He was 22. A junior financial analyst fresh out of college, and unfortunately for the executives, he was very good at his job. "Actually, Preston, I was looking at the liability ledger yesterday," Owen said, tapping his laptop. "I saw a flag on the contingent liabilities tab, something listed as royalty class B. It has been accruing at 0.5% of gross contract value." The room went quiet. Preston frowned. "Royalty? We do not pay royalties. We are a software-as-a-service platform, not a record label. It is in the legacy database," Owen persisted, his voice tight. "Clause 17 of the Vanguard contract. The system flagged it as an active liability because our system uptime has been so high for the last 3 quarters. Preston turned his head to Harvey. "Harvey, what is the kid talking about?" Harvey shrugged, looking bored. "I do not know. Probably some old boilerplate the previous lawyers left in." "Just ignore it." "I cannot just ignore a flagged liability, Harvey," Owen said, looking nervous. "If the external auditors see this during the merger review—" "Owen," Preston snapped, cutting him off. "We are not paying royalties. Delete the flag. Reclassify it as a system anomaly." Owen froze. He looked at his laptop, then looked up and caught my eye. He knew I handled the contracts. I held his gaze, keeping my face completely neutral. I did not nod or shake my head. My silent expression told him, "Do not be a hero." Owen looked back at the CFO. "But if the contract language—" "Delete the flag, Owen," Preston barked. God, why does everyone in this department want to find problems? We are trying to clear the audit for the merger. Reclassify it so we can move on. Owen slumped in his chair. "Okay." Reclassifying as system anomaly. He pressed a key, and the red flag on the projection screen disappeared. I sat quietly, my pen poised over my notebook. They had just committed willful financial fraud, suppressing a known liability in front of witnesses. I wrote down the exact time, 10:14 a.m. CFO Preston Cole orders deletion of Clause 17 liability flag. Owen Pierce complies under duress. "Arthur," Preston said, turning to me suddenly. "You track the IP registry. We do not owe anyone royalties, right?" This was the moment. I could lie and protect them, which would implicate me later, or I could tell the truth in a way they were too arrogant to understand. "The contract language is very specific, Preston," I said, my voice calm. "Clause 17 exists in the executed agreement. Whether or not you choose to acknowledge the liability on the balance sheet is an accounting decision, not a contractual one." "See?" Preston said, turning back to the room. "It is legacy boilerplate, an accounting decision, and I have decided it is 0. Let us move on to the next item." He heard exactly what he wanted to hear. He thought I was agreeing with him. After the meeting, my screen lit up with a Slack message from Owen. "Owen, Arthur, that contract clause. I saw your initials on the draft logs. You wrote it, didn't you?" I waited a moment before typing back, "Arthur. Owen, if I were you, I would send a brief email to Preston confirming his instruction to delete that flag. BCC your personal email address. Just to keep your records clear. Owen, is it that bad?" "Arthur, do it now." 10 minutes later, A copy of the email landed in my personal inbox. Owen had BCC'd me. He had just bought himself a life raft. As for Preston and Harvey, they had just drilled a hole in the hull of their own ship to let the water out. I spent Saturday morning with my lawyer, Sylvia Crane. She operated out of a small, quiet office in a commercial park. Sylvia was a formidable woman who spent her career dismantling corporate executives. I laid out the timeline, the printed reports, the HR rejection email, Harvey's instruction to ignore the audit, and my notes from the Friday meeting. Sylvia read through the papers, her face expressionless. She flipped each page with a sharp snap. When she finished, she took off her glasses. "They are incredibly foolish," she said. "They are arrogant," I corrected. "They believe the rules are only for the people who cannot afford to break them." "Well," Sylvia smiled, showing sharp white teeth, "the rules are about to become very expensive for them. Here is our strategy. Vanguard is going to file a breach of contract claim. Apex Logics will panic. Their first instinct will be to find someone to blame, and they will try to fire you for negligence. The moment they threaten you, we file the whistleblower lawsuit. Retaliation, wage theft, and Sarbanes-Oxley violations." "Can we win?" I asked. "We will not just win, Arthur. We will own them. I am drafting the representation letter now. We will hold it until Vanguard sues. The second they move against you, we drop this on HR. It freezes them. They cannot legally fire you while you have an active whistleblower claim regarding the very contract they are being sued over. It makes you untouchable." I went home. I spent the rest of the weekend cleaning my house. I needed to keep my hands busy. On Sunday night, I stood on my deck looking out at the dark valley. I thought about the last 5 years, the late nights, the missed family dinners, the weekends spent fixing mistakes because we were supposed to be a team. I had given them my expertise, and they could not even grant me a simple cost of living adjustment. "Your raise got lost in legal," I whispered to the dark. It was no longer about the money, it was about respect. They looked at me and saw nothing. Tomorrow they were going to see everything. Monday morning began with the monthly all-hands meeting at 8:45 a.m. This was a company ritual where the CEO, Garrison Brooks, stood on a wooden stage in the cafeteria and told everyone how we were changing the world. The room was packed with people holding coffees and looking exhausted. Garrison was up there wearing a t-shirt that said "Disrupt" under a designer blazer. "This quarter is looking incredible," he shouted into the microphone. "Vanguard is expanding. We are on a 20% growth trajectory." I stood in the back of the room. Leaning against the wall near the exit, I checked my watch. It was 8:52 a.m., right on time. The double doors at the back of the cafeteria swung open. 2 men in dark conservative suits walked in. They were not wearing Silicon Valley casual. They were dressed in federal court formal. Behind them walked Richard Thornton. The cafeteria grew quiet as ripples of confusion spread through the crowd. Garrison stopped talking mid-sentence, squinting against the stage lights. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Garrison asked. Richard walked straight toward the stage. He did not look at the crowd. He kept his eyes locked on the CEO. "Garrison Brooks?" Richard asked. "Yes," Garrison said. "Who are you?" One of the men in suits stepped forward and handed Garrison a thick stack of papers bound by a heavy clip. "You are being served," the man said. "Civil lawsuit for copyright infringement, breach of contract, and willful financial noncompliance. Plaintiff is Vanguard Logistics." The room went dead silent. You could hear the faint hiss of the espresso machine in the corner. "What is this?" Garrison laughed nervously. "Is this a joke? Preston? Harvey?" Harvey Miller pushed his way through the crowd to the front of the stage. "Richard, what the hell is this? We have a compliance meeting scheduled for next week." "We had a deadline," Richard cut him off. His voice was loud, carrying clearly across the room without a microphone. "It expired on Thursday. You failed to respond to our formal notice of audit. Under Clause 17 of the agreement, Vanguard is immediately terminating the service contract for cause and seeking damages for the unauthorized use of unlicensed intellectual property." "Terminating?" Garrison's face turned the color of chalk. "You cannot terminate. That is an $80 million contract." "It was an $80 million contract," Richard corrected him. "Now it is a lawsuit for $120 million, including treble damages for federal copyright infringement under Title 17 of the United States Code and the fraud we detected during our preliminary review." "Fraud?" Preston Cole squeaked from the side of the stage. We have documented evidence that you suppress known liabilities regarding the IP architect's royalties, Richard said. His eyes scanned the back of the room. He found me. I did not wave. I did not smile. I simply adjusted my glasses. Richard looked back at the CEO. Your license to use the routing software is revoked effective immediately. You must shut down all Vanguard data processing within 24 hours, unless you can prove you have settled the outstanding debts to the IP owner. Garrison looked at the papers, flipping them open frantically. IP owner? We own the IP. What are you talking about? Read page 42, Garrison, Richard said coldly. Clause 17. You only own the IP rights once you pay the royalty. You have not paid. Harvey grabbed the papers from Garrison's hands. He scanned the page, and I saw his hands begin to shake. The papers rattled in his grip. The raise, Harvey whispered, his voice cracking. The cost of living adjustment. He looked up, staring over the heads of the staff to the back of the room. He looked directly at me. Every head in the room turned. 200 employees followed Harvey's gaze to where I was standing by the exit. I did not shrink. I did not look away. I began to walk forward. The crowd parted quickly, leaving a wide path. I walked right up to the edge of the stage. Arthur, Garrison said, his voice trembling. What is going on here? I think, I said, keeping my voice calm and clear, that my raise just got found illegal. I pulled a white envelope from my blazer pocket. It was Sylvia Crane's letter of representation and the formal whistleblower filing. I handed it to Harvey. I believe this belongs to you, Harvey, I said. Then I turned to Richard Thornton. Shall we go to the conference room? We have some negotiations to handle. Richard smiled. After you, Mr. Vance, we walked out of the cafeteria together. Behind us, the silence broke into absolute chaos. 10 minutes later, we were in the main boardroom. On one side of the table sat Richard Thornton and I. On the other side were Garrison Brooks, Preston Cole, and Harvey Miller. In the middle of the table lay the thick stack of lawsuit papers. The silence in the room was heavy. Garrison looked like he was about to be physically sick. Arthur, look, we can fix this, he said. We can unlock that raise immediately, retroactive. 10%. 15%. I let out a soft laugh. Garrison, we are far past 15%. We are talking about Clause 17. Do you even know what that is? It is a loophole you hid in the contract, Preston Cole shouted. His face was red and he was sweating. This is sabotage. It is a standard intellectual property protection clause, Richard Thornton said smoothly. One that your company signed, one that your system triggered, and one that your management team completely ignored when you were notified. We did not know, Harvey Miller pleaded. Arthur did not warn us. I looked at Harvey. I sent you an email on Tuesday morning, Harvey. The subject line was Vanguard Inquiry. I told you I needed to pull the files to check Clause 17. You told me to take my time and to focus on the merger documents instead. You did not even open the attachment. Harvey opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He knew I had the emails saved. Here is the reality of the situation, Richard said, leaning forward. Apex Logics owes Arthur $450,000 in retroactive royalties plus interest. Furthermore, because you instructed your staff to delete the financial liability flag in your ledger, you are looking at personal liability for accounting fraud under federal regulations. Preston Cole turned pale. Owen, he whispered. That kid sent me a confirmation email. Owen is a good kid, I said. Leave him out of this. What do you want? Arthur? Garrison asked, his voice flat and defeated. You want the money? Fine, we will pay the $450,000. Just make Vanguard drop the lawsuit. If we lose this contract, the merger is dead and the company is finished. It is not just about the money, I said. It is about control. You have proven you cannot be trusted with the intellectual property. You tried to erase the debt to the creator of the system. I slid a paper across the table. It was the term sheet I had prepared with my lawyer, Sylvia Crane. 1. Immediate payment of all back royalties, totaling $482,000 with interest. 2. A formal internal apology issued to the company for payroll administration errors. 3. Reinstatement of the royalty clause, with a penalty clause for any future payment delays. 4. My legal fees paid in full by the company. Garrison read the paper. This is a massive sum of money, Arthur. It is significantly cheaper than losing an $80 million client, Richard pointed out. Vanguard will only drop the lawsuit if Arthur signs a waiver confirming he has been paid in full. If he does not sign, we walk out that door. Garrison looked at Preston. Preston looked at the floor. Harvey was holding his head in his hands. And one more thing, I added. They all looked up. I want a promotion, I said. Director of Contract Compliance and IP Governance. I will report directly to the Board of Directors, not to the legal department. I do not trust Harvey to read my emails anymore. Harvey winced. I also want full authority to audit all executive expenses for compliance with vendor contracts, I continued. Preston's eyes widened. He knew what was in the corporate credit card reports. The expensive dinners, the personal weekend trips, the Napa Valley retreats. You cannot do that, Preston whispered. Then Richard files the lawsuit, I said. The discovery process in federal court will expose all of those financial records anyway. It is your choice, Preston. An internal audit by me or a federal audit by the courts. The boardroom was silent for a long minute. The air conditioner hummed in the background. Garrison slumped back in his chair. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in 5 years. He did not see the quiet man in the gray sweater anymore. He saw the person who held the key to his company. Fine, Garrison whispered. We will sign. Excellent, Richard said, pulling a pen from his pocket. I have the settlement agreement ready. I watched them sign. Garrison's signature was shaky. Preston looked like he was signing a confession. Harvey just looked tired. When they were finished, I took my copy of the document. Thank you, gentlemen, I said. Now, if you will excuse me, I have some work to do. It seems we have a compliance issue that got lost in legal. The wire transfer cleared on Wednesday afternoon. $482,340.12. I stared at the balance on my phone. It looked like freedom, but the money was only the beginning. The following week, the changes started. The board announced that Garrison Brooks was stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on long-term strategy. It was a polite way of saying he had been benched. Preston Cole decided to pursue other opportunities. He was escorted out of the building on Tuesday morning, carrying a cardboard box of personal belongings to his car. My first audit of his corporate expenses had turned up some very interesting consulting payments to his brother-in-law. Harvey Miller remained, but he was a changed man. He kept his office door closed, actually reading contracts now. Every time he passed me in the hallway, he nodded respectfully. I took over the corner office, the one with the view of the bay. I hired Owen. He is my senior analyst now. We have a simple policy. We read everything, we flag everything, and we never ignore a red cell in the spreadsheet. Vanguard remained our largest client. Richard and I have lunch once a month. We do not talk about software. We talk about wine, travel, and the foolishness of executives who think they can ignore the fine print. 6 months later, I received an email from Justin Finch in HR. Subject: Annual Review and Compensation Adjustment. Hi, Arthur. Just wanted to let you know that your new compensation package has been fully approved by the board. No issues this cycle. Best, Justin. I smiled. I took a sip of my tea, the expensive green tea that I now expense to the company account. I clicked reply. Thanks, Justin. Make sure you file it correctly this time. We would not want it to get lost in legal again. I closed my laptop. The sun was setting over Silicon Valley, casting long shadows across the glass buildings. They say the devil is in the details. They are wrong. The devil is in the person who reads the details, and he just got paid.